Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
We're going to talk about eating food, your baby eating food.
Eating food.
Transitioning to solids. And I think there's a few things we want to touch on here, but just that transition from, okay, their little digestive systems have finally mastered formula and milk and the liquid diet. And then what's next? And that can be a question for parents that comes up. So we'll go into a lot of the practical stuff, and then we'll probably diverge down some detours along the way.
Yeah, I'm so curious which way you're going to head with this. I do want to say one thing when I was introducing my son to solids was I felt that there was this big push to introduce them around like 6 months and kind of like this hard, I don't know, did you feel that? Like kind of this hard rule, like you need to start introducing solids at 6 months. And if you wait any longer, then
Yeah, and I think I'm going to make a note for a future podcast, as we always do, of just like milestones in general and people freaking out or they're being a little bit rigid around these milestones or markers of 6 months, we should be introducing this or that. And I agree. What I was told is your kiddo is interested in foods, they'll show you. And I think that's true. We always come back to what's your intuitive hit. And then part of the journey with your kiddo is to really start teaching them to trust their intuition. I mean, they actually are very intuitive. They come out, they are pure intuition. And so watching their intuition and kind of letting your intuition mirror their intuition and kind of seeing where the two merge. So I was taught that children are interested in food when they start looking at it, and they literally appear interested in food. If you put a solid in front of a child and they kind of just play with it or whatever, they don't even put in their mouth, and that's sensory play, which food can also be used for sensory play. And I think that's an important point. But as far as them actually wanting to consume food, they'll show you the signs. That could be for some 6 months. That tends to be around the mark, right? With give or take a couple of months on either side. So maybe for some it's more toward 4, which is very, very rare. I've also seen kids that are almost a whole year old that don't want to eat solids. They just no interest in all.
That was the thing. Like I felt a little bit forced looking back as I gained knowledge. We do the best we can with the information we have at the time. And I felt like he just was not really ready at 6 months, but I felt this huge pressure also culturally in society from friends and family for him to start introducing solids and get him off breast milk. I wish I would have known. This is talking about a general milestone. That is why I brought it up, but that's awesome that you knew that information ahead of time. And I just want to put that out there in the beginning of our transitioning to solids for all those that don't know.
Yeah, and that's not to say even knowing that there's no right or wrong, that doesn't make cultural pressure any easier to deal with. It can still be very difficult coming from whatever cultural background that you might be in or that you are in, coming from our parents and their ideas, coming from our pediatricians or any other medical people in our life or support we have. There's many places that we can get either solicited or unsolicited advice, and that it can feel really hard when your intuition is not in alignment with that, and you could feel really, I don't know the word, but othered in some senses.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I guess I can start with mine. We did baby-led weaning. And so I want to lead with that because I also think this is such a great thing. It's not for everyone. It does freak some people out. And I think we can go back to, if it's going to stress you out, then don't do anything that's going to stress you out. Stressing you out is not the point of anything you're doing. And you also, as a parent, have the best intuition for what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your child. If you haven't explored baby led weaning, though, check it out. I always recommend people check it out because I thought it was. You're familiar with baby led weaning?
A little. I need a refresher. I'll
Two
tell you
parts
what I
to
do with
it.
my son.
I kind of need a refresher too. But from what I remember, first of all, it's child led focus as far as when they want to eat. So that's part of it, what we were just talking about. You let the child choose when they're interested in foods.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is you're not starting the babies with puree, you're starting them with solids. So you're
Mm-hmm.
giving them the whole banana versus pureed banana or an apple. You're giving them
Mm-hmm.
the whole avocado. And a lot of parents feel more comfortable using softer foods. You can give them big chunks of food. So I would even give my baby carrot, like when my baby was teething, I
Mm-hmm.
would give her celery or carrots to chew on, like bigger chunks of food. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember even before maybe she had a tooth or two, I would give her big chunks of chicken.
Mm-hmm.
She loved them. It was amazing how much she could mash. I just didn't even know chicken could be pulverized the way it could
Mm-hmm.
without teeth. It would just like disintegrate and disappear. There are lots of resources. We'll link some resources for baby led weaning, and you do have to be obviously aware of not giving your child the like perfect chokeable size of a piece of whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, giving them bigger pieces of things, and if you're
Mm-hmm.
sitting there with them, they can often gnaw on a lot of foods, even if they're not soft. And
Mm-hmm.
those foods, our digestive system's very smart, tend to disintegrate. There were a couple times where people around me were like, "Oh, your baby," because she would cough, or, but they're actually learning the skills of utilizing their tongue and their mouth and chewing and all the motions that are part of digesting and eating. They're learning
Mm-hmm.
that then sooner and more naturally versus starting with more purees and liquids and then moving to
Mm-hmm.
solids from there. They might not develop that then at the young age that they do. So I found it very interesting and fascinating. And I also found it easy as a parent to
Yeah.
not have to worry about purees. We have some great
Yeah.
resources out or things out there now, like the pouches and things like that. But it a led to giving your child more natural foods, I
Mm-hmm.
felt from the beginning, letting your child explore different textures and sizes and learning how to grip things with their hand and learning how to hold it, bring it to their mouth, chew it. All these little
Mm-hmm.
things that just felt to me more natural. And then also for me as a parent was less stressful because wherever I was, I could order a piece of salmon when I'm out and let
Mm-hmm.
my kid just chew on some salmon or order some other food. Oftentimes avocados. I can't remember what else, but things come to mind that you could easily
Mm-hmm.
order in a restaurant on the side. And
Yeah.
then you don't have to bring your baby extra food. It's like you can order them something.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. Just a few things that came to mind is they also said, like when I was researching it, also good in the baby led weaning because they're learning to eat the food that you eat. They're not going to have Indian food and Thai food or maybe even Mexican food in one of those jars. So they said too, like when you do this baby led weaning, there it will be a tendency for them to develop a wider palate and be able to be more open. And if you look at a lot of our food, like the baby food, it's very bland and sure they're just developing their palate. So we don't want to give them a ton of herbs and like explode their poor little tongues. But the point is that how long are you continuing that for as opposed to like slowly evolving it, like starting with avocado and then one day they're sitting on your lap or sitting at the dinner table and you give them a little bit of the rice with all the spices. So with my son, we followed the Weston A. Price. And one of the things that I learned that you talked about with this mashed up food is that it's our jaws over time are beginning to narrow because we're actually not chewing. And they're saying that now babies, if you go back, quote unquote, our caveman era, right? Like they didn't have a food processor to mash up food, right? So like what did they do? They gave the babies whatever, like they would chew up a little bit of meat for them just to get it enough to a good size where, like you said, it's a big chunk and they can chew it. So they're getting all that jaw work, they're getting the nutrients and all that stuff. And it's actually better for their jaw. And because the processed foods like create this kind of like narrowing jaw. And then he was also saying that all that processed food gets stuck to our teeth, unlike a piece of chicken. If she ate chicken in a thing, it'd probably have chicken and apples. So that's a sugar that's now starting to get coated on the teeth of the kids, as opposed to just giving them a chunk of chicken to like chew on a little bit and be aware. So those are like some things that came up with the Weston A. Price version. It's interesting how they kind of incorporated that into like a modern version of baby-led weaning, the
On that note,
healthiest.
the chewing
Yeah.
with what you were talking about with the processed, that was
Mhm.
I it starts the digestive process when you're chewing, the saliva release,
Mhm.
which you don't get from just purees. There's little parts that we don't even think of as adults
Mhm.
when we're eating that actually help us digest our food or clean
Yeah.
our teeth.
Mhm.
Saliva is there to help keep your teeth in a
Yeah.
healthy state. So,
And it's also really interesting because in Chinese medicine, they actually say, Western medicine, we learn that, yeah, like saliva is like the actual first start of our digestion. But in Chinese medicine, it's before that. They're like, it's when you see the food, when you're cooking it, when you start to smell it, all those are like triggering our processing to actually do the food. And so if you're just giving them a jar, they're not seeing it. And the other thing I learned too through that discovery is that kids also, it's important for them to learn to touch food and play with food. Even if they don't eat it, just playing with it. We see the food first. Oh, that looks good. Oh, I might not like it, but it looks good. So I'm going to at least try it. And that's the whole process of playing with the food too.
yeah.
And yeah,
They'll
so
often bring that up, that introducing foods to kids, even if they're not getting most of it in their mouth, it is developing so many skills, and then feeling the textures.
mhm,
I don't know the research behind it, but I have heard that as well, that just allowing your kids to feel the different textures of food or play with them or look at them and just kind of
mhm,
see how steamed broccoli might feel different from big long stick of
mhm,
chicken that you have, or how a banana feels different from something else. It is interesting. Even like a baked potato, if you take the skin off, you could take like a big piece
mhm,
of baked potato and give it to them. And I think all of these added together, it's definitely, when given the choice, I like
mhm.
that option, for at least that worked for me and for
Yeah.
my
And
kiddo.
then, and the other thing too, like I learned is that it takes kids, they said anywhere from, I think, about 25 times to try something to actually really like it. So if you give them avocado, they might spit it out, and then like you reintroduce it and you put it on the plate. I'm not saying force it down, but you put it on there and you offer it again. And they said it could take up to 25 times for someone to actually
Yeah, and
like
that
something.
changes too. I remember things as a kid, personally as a kid, that I used to hate, and
Yeah.
then I don't know, all of a sudden I loved. And
And
so,
yeah,
and I
different.
think coming back to the balance thing, like we say in all
Hmm.
our podcasts, having those pouches on the go, those applesauces on the go,
Hmm.
or whatever it is great to have access to those. So it's not like
Yep.
never ever use purees, never ever do this. Those are such easy things to throw in your bag, and I'm so like feel so grateful that they're there.
Yeah.
They're
100%.
but also you can do both. Like it's not like one or the
Yeah.
other. You can do both
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah, it's like nice to be able to throw a pouch in the diaper bag and head to the park, as opposed to like, cutting up some chicken and like making sure it kept cold for the 2 or 3 hours that you're out or whatever. So I love the pouches. They're great for on the go. And then that's how we try to balance it. Save it for when we're out on the go, and then try to eat more the foods and stuff like that and
Yeah.
at home.
Let's talk about pooping.
Okay. I
The
love
best
poop.
part of
Yeah.
transitioning to solids,
It's a great
which,
one to bring up.
yeah, let's talk about it, because I this is something I want to talk about for the early days of newborn to 6 months, because I think it comes up a lot. But your child's digestive system's constantly changing, and then of course when you start introducing solids, that is going to change. Their digestive system is going to go through a whole nother up level,
Mm-hmm.
basically, which will cause changes. And one thing I hear from a lot of parents is just the concern that their child is constipated as they're
Mm-hmm.
transitioning to solids. And also, you will maybe experience your child actually seeming constipated because they're having to struggle, for lack
Mm-hmm.
of a better word. They'll grunt, their face will be a little bit more, they'll have to put more energy into pooping than what they've
Mm-hmm.
gotten used to.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
I'm so happy you brought it up because I think it's a common question we get a lot is my kid hasn't pooped and it's been 2 going on 3 days. We just started introducing solids, like, mhm. Having awareness around it and watching it, like, you don't wanna go definitely not over a week for sure, but it's hard. Some kids don't poop every day, some babies don't, and so when we look at poop, I would say just kinda look at your baby's quote unquote "normal" before and then change it up after. Just be
And look at
patient.
the poop itself. That's another thing.
Yes.
Look at the poop itself. And oftentimes, even I'll have parents concerned that they feel like it's so hard for their kid to poop. But then when they look at the poop is normal. It's not,
Mhm.
doesn't look like little pellets. It's not showing
Right.
real extreme signs of constipation or dehydration or anything. And that's just part of them adjusting. It feels
Mhm.
different for
Yeah.
them. The poop might be more solid, but it's still a healthy solid. So
Yeah.
they're adjusting as a kiddo. And the best thing you can do is just be there and support them. My kiddo was one of those that she looked like she was giving labor every time she was pooping.
Oh.
You're there with them, you support them, and they're working through it. And as
Mhm.
long as there's no signs in the poop of any additional concerns,
Mhm.
then it's just part of growing pains. It really
Well,
is. It's just a
you
growing
yeah.
pain in a different way where their digestive system is changing and the way that their little muscles are responding to it is they're working harder and they're changing. And so they will eventually be fine, but it's
Mhm.
usually part of the process.
And I just wanna throw in here too, as you know, we both do EC, that this is another thing they talk about in our culture is that our kids don't we do not put them in, like, an EC hold where they're essentially, like, in a squatting position to go to the bathroom, right? And so they're saying during this time of transitioning, our kids are actually not put into an ideal body position to help encourage better digestion and stuff. Kids are either, like, sitting up or standing up, laying down, because that's how they used to go. It's not like they we're really going over to squat necessarily to go to the bathroom. I just want to throw that in there too. Start doing massages too, like little bicycles, belly rub, what we can do to help assist them. I always gave my little guy probiotics and then just make sure that he's eating higher fiber diet, the foods that he has eating. Processed food, like if we think about it, it's dry, right? So that's going to take up more liquid in the stomach and stuff like that. So like I'd always try to get stuff that would encourage movement for them.
If
Yeah.
you're not practicing elimination communication and you're introducing solids and you see the grunting, it's a great time you
Mhm.
want to experiment with it. Get a little
Yeah.
potty, and usually by 6 months, your
Yep.
kiddos are strong. They can
Mhm.
sit your little kiddo on a potty while
Yep.
they're working it through.
Pooping.
And that's another way too. I think also, oftentimes when our kids are in diaper, not we're not like looking them in the eye and
Mhm.
giving them that support.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if your kid
So
is
true.
struggling, you could sit them on the little potty. You could
Yep.
even we'll link our thing about elimination communication, but there's seat reducers, there's little
Mhm.
potties, whatever it is, but that gives you the opportunity to hold them, look them in the
Mhm.
eye and let them know you're there with them. It's okay. Like this is normal. You're going to do this. So there is a opportunity there. The beauty is that's kind of teaching your kiddo because they are becoming more somatically aware of the feeling of going potty
Mhm.
and what comes before they need to go, they might actually start preferring to poop outside of their
Mhm.
diapers. So that's
Yeah.
a plus, a win if you
A lot of them actually do, and I would say a lot of families that I work with, even when they're having troubles, I don't even care if I'd never catch a pee. I just wanna catch the poo. So, just as, like, a little encouragement, even if you don't do any pees and you just put them on there when they're grunting in the poop, that's a huge win, and, like, it's so nice, trust me. Do it
I
just
have
for the
another
poos.
direction we can go down because I think we have similar thoughts about this, but I mean oftentimes as we're introducing foods and this is maybe later on, parents worry about the sugar or what they're
Mhm.
feeding their baby.
Yeah.
And that yeah, I do you want to start down that path? What should I feed my baby? Obviously whole natural foods, whether that's
Mhm.
pureed or not,
Yeah.
is going to be what you want to give to your little one as your first foods. And I don't know if you have any other insight or opinions about that, and then we can go down the spectrum of quote unquote good foods versus bad foods.
Don't talk about that one with me. It's like my big thing. Okay, so for yeah, the sugar, I didn't give my son actually sugar until he was 1. That was kind of my rule for people, and people pretty much really respected it like when I brought it up because I just felt it's gonna happen. Like he's gonna eat sugar, so like why not encourage a healthy relationship with it? But I don't think he needs to have it before 1. He got 6 months of breast milk. He can have 6 months of food without any processed sugar. He can have fruit and watermelon is so sweet. It's got sugar in it, obviously, but it's a non-processed food. So that's how I personally felt about the sugar. He still has not had soda. Like that was my other thing that I was very big on as he got older. And I never gave him juice. So even once he could have sugar, it was never in the form of juice. It was very rare. And if it was juice, it started off at like 75% to 25% juice. And then like as he got older, we kind of upped it. That was kind of my thought process around sugar because they say it's so bad for your gut biome. And they also said it's awful for your teeth. And then we kind of have this addiction to it. I say put it off kind of as long as possible, but at the same time, we'll get into it more about the whole good and bad food, but as he got older, he was really into M&Ms. So for a while, M&Ms was on every meal plate he had, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that was to show him that, hey, there's no food is better or worse. And so it gave him this relationship. So now he'll go to places, people will be like, hey, you want some cake or ice cream? And sometimes he says no. And then other times he's like, yeah, I want it. So I think there's like that healthy relationship with the sugar too. That's my take on it. I don't know if that answered what you're headed for.
Yeah, I just think it's everyone again has their own ways and relations to things. One thing I do want to say is what you're eating at home
Hmm.
is going to be like lead by example. Your
Hmm.
kids pay attention to that.
Yep.
And obviously, when they're 6 months to a year, we don't think that they're consciously paying attention, but our behaviors are going to strongly influence their behaviors. And
Hmm.
they'll still notice. They will notice. They are much earlier than we think picking
Hmm.
up on things and understanding us much
Hmm.
earlier. I remember I think my daughter was a year and a half or something, and we were like, put on your hat, which is saying it. And she then did it. And we were like,
Hmm.
oh, you like understand
Yeah,
everything that we're
of
saying, even though
course.
you're not talking a word yet. So they
Yes.
really do early on pick things up and they're very aware.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I want to put in there is you want to model what you're hoping your kids will have.
Hmm.
I agree. As far as first foods, there's a million and two things out there you can read as like the best first foods to give your kiddo. Proteins and fats. I think going back to that
Yeah.
diet you're talking about
Weston
with
A.
kiddos,
Price. Hmm.
proteins and fats are really great for
Yep. For
young
kids.
ones. And
Yep.
um,
Avocado is like a perfect example of that.
avocados,
Yeah.
eggs,
Eggs.
yogurt
Yeah. Interesting.
also weaves into the whole introducing them to what tend to be high allergy foods. So you
Hmm.
can do that. Another reason to introduce whole foods like whole eggs or peanut butter, things like that early on. Peanut butter is a tricky one. I think they recommend being over a year because
Hmm.
of the the consistency of it. Kiddos can choke on it. So I don't know. Check with
Oh, I
but
thought it was just because the high allergy
I don't know if it's the
reasoning
allergy. I do know there is like some choking component to because of
that's so thick.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Anyway,
also just to note here of other things, not over honey cannot be given to kids
under a
unless they're
year.
1 or older.
Yeah.
Yeah, under a
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
So do check on certain things. There's a lot more I think exploring you can do. Use your intuition. There are certain things obviously they say don't give your kids honey, don't give them I think peanut butter is over a year too, but there's other things that maybe there's not information out there and you're like, is this good? Is this okay? Use your intuition. Most of the time you're gonna be fine if you're listening to your
Hmm.
intuition.
Yeah.
As far as the sugar thing goes, 100% agree on I think from 6 months to a year, it's really easy to control still what
Yep.
our kiddos are eating. Oftentimes, they're not eating much solids anyway. It's a
Exactly.
slow introduction of playing with
Hmm.
food, maybe getting some in their mouth, and they'll still be taking a bottle, taking milk, or breastfeeding.
Hmm. Hmm.
They'll still be getting some of that liquid, that diet that they've been having forever.
Hmm.
And they're oftentimes not very mobile they're with us more. It's just easier. They're not talking. They're still very connected to us, so we can control a lot of that. And I agree. I personally just stuck with whole foods as much as possible, whatever a whole
Mhm.
natural food was. When it did get to that age where they're talking more, they're with other people more, I too released restrictions. We had a rule of when we're in our house, we eat this way.
Mhm.
And when you're out, there might be other things that happen, and that's okay because I had to realize I can't control everything that's going to happen in my child's life. With trusted people, well, I tell them my preference, and
Mhm.
also I can't control everything. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
again, going to stress me out to the point that's not
Uh,
productive for anyone.
Healthy. Yeah.
It got to the point because she had started getting introduced to cupcakes or whatever as she was older, and she'd come home and she'd want treats. Much like you said, we don't use good or bad food, but we
Mhm.
use healthy and treats
Yes.
as our
Mhm.
words. You can have treats, but we can't have treats all the time. We have to have
Mhm.
healthy food with the treats. And she
Mhm.
understands that balance now. And sometimes
Yeah.
she'll be asking for treats. I'm like, well, you've had treats already. Now you need to eat some healthy food to balance it, and then we can have more treats. And so we work on balance. It's our
Yeah.
motto.
I
But
love that, and we do that too, like, the thing if I notice he's eating more treats, I'm like, "Hey, you need to eat some healthy food," and it's so interesting because kids wanna eat healthy. Just have to remind them, and he's like,
yeah,
"Okay," and, like, we'll go grab an orange or a banana
yep,
or whatever, and totally eats healthy, but it's because he knows he can have both. It's
yep,
fine, I just
exactly.
have to
No
eat
restriction
healthier.
on it. We just have to
Yeah,
balance it. And I've experienced the same
exactly.
thing. No arguments ever. Same thing. Okay, like give me some broccoli, give me
Yep,
some Brussels sprouts. Like, where is it? Let's do this.
yep.
I was just saying we experienced the same thing as well, where it leads to now being in situations where there's treats offered, and
Mhm,
she's at a point where she can listen to her body and no thanks, I'm no ice cream, or no thanks, I don't want any cookies. She'll listen if she's full and she's had something. And
mhm,
so I think the balance is the key. Also understanding, again, we live in a world, we haven't gotten to this point, I haven't gotten to this point. For example, social media, we know
mhm,
it's not great, right? And we know
mhm,
it's a really integral part of the world we live in, and our
mhm,
kids are going to experience social media when they're older. So it's like, what are
mhm,
we teaching them on how to relate to this
mhm,
in a way that's healthy versus being
mhm.
like, no, you can't have this. We don't eat this in our family. No, no, no. Because
It's
the fact is it's out there, and what we can do best as parents, I believe, is teach our children how to relate to things in a healthy way.
it's so interesting because he just got into YouTube, and it's hard because the YouTube kid, he likes to make paper airplanes. So like he'll go and watch YouTube videos. Well, YouTube videos of paper airplanes are made by adults and it's not kid friendly. I can't keep those parent control locks on in that way for just YouTube kids. But it's fascinating. I actually talked to his therapist and she said the first thing we want to teach them is safety first. That I love. Above anything, like safety first. So that's our first rule. Second rule is anything that you see, I get to watch and I can go back and look at your history. And then the third thing, and I constantly remind him, I say, just so you know, what you're watching gets put into your head. So be aware of what is being put and told into your head. What do you want to be told? What is this show telling you? What is it telling you in your head? Just to bring awareness around it as opposed to this is a good thing or a bad thing. Do you want to be putting someone hitting someone sad and getting hit or something in your head, or do you want to be putting something funny on? That type of thing.
Yeah, and
So,
relating
but
that back to food, you can use the same concept. Just what
same
we put in our
concept.
bodies is going to change how we feel. Everything we
Mhm.
put in our bodies helps us
Yeah.
grow, gives us energy, or maybe makes us a little tired. Just
Mhm.
also bringing awareness. It's a fun game to play. Okay, let's eat that, and let's see in 10 minutes how we feel. Checking in with our bodies, and that's kind of a fun thing to do as well. Or when you notice your kid feels a certain way after they ate something, maybe helping them see that awareness. Oh,
Yes.
you notice that when we ate this, we felt this way. Okay.
Mhm.
And they'll act, they listen to that, like
Mhm.
probably more than adults do. So
100%, 100%. And I just want to circle back to about our kids saying no to treats and stuff like that because of that openness. I want to say too that is also just points out that our bodies do actually know what we need. And this kind of just to go a little in depth about like the good and bad foods is that if our body doesn't need it, even if there's say there's some sugar, right? Say I want ice cream or the cupcake, there's something in there if I really want it that my body could take from and utilize it. And maybe it's an emotional thing. Like the sugar is going to make me feel really good. And that's exactly what I need in the moment or whatever. If we really do listen to our bodies, it will tell us what we need and don't need, even on sweets and stuff like
yeah,
that.
it's like the
Yeah.
intuitive eating.
Yeah. Just wanted to touch on
I
that a
and
little.
that goes to the energetics of eating because it's not all about science. Sometimes it's we like to
Yeah.
enjoy things because they make us feel good or they'll invoke a memory.
And one of the things too, especially in our culture for girls, I really feel there's so much pressure to look a certain way and be a certain way. And they say that really does start at our dinner table. So one of the things that I read and I just thought it was the best ever, they said you do not have to force your kids to eat, but they have to sit at the dining room table with you with the rest of the family, teaching the kids from a young age. They say when we're at the table and we're like sitting there and forced to like finish our food and eat at these times, we're what are we doing is like teaching ourselves not to listen to our body.
I think with that, sometimes depending on different family situations, whatever, it's hard to do like a family sit down dinner for most people.
It's so
And
hard.
sure, do it when you can. There is a value to it. And also, again, just taking time to pause to eat,
Mhm.
which is usually easier in the early days because you have more routine with your kiddo. And then as they get older, especially if they do want to eat, trying
Mhm.
to like create a little bit of space for, okay, we're going to take 20 minutes to eat and then we can get back to what we're doing. Uh,
Mhm. We always contained it to the kitchen and like sat
yeah, I do both
and
because
even now.
there's community out there. I mean, I'll bring out there's 20 like whatever 15 kids out on the street and I'll bring out food to like our stoop
Yeah.
and all the kids will
Yeah.
be eating, whatever it is. So we
That's
have
different. That's totally
well, but we
different
have I mean that's a lot of nights here.
for you guys. That's awesome.
So it's just dependent on but some nights we do again intuitively I'm like you just need to pause and we need to have a little
Mhm.
time to like breathe and eat,
Yes.
versus you grabbing the quesadilla while you're
Yeah.
running around outside. Yeah.
Well, and
Um,
that's, that goes into the energetics really because it's especially if you have digestive issues, like it's important to sit down and be conscious of chewing and enjoy the flavors. If you have a tendency to overeat, those are all reasons to more so to like sit down and really be conscious of what you're doing. And that is one thing we try to have. There's at least one meal where there's no screens. We all like you're sitting down, you're consciously eating.
yeah. I think this
Yeah.
is where it comes like from 6 months all the way. Kiddos, if they're paused, if there
Mm-hmm.
is a built-in time to pause,
Mm-hmm.
then they can tune into their body, and that teaches them, hey,
Yes.
like listen, because when you're running around or playing, even we do this with the EC too. It comes up if they're playing and they're really focused with something, they're not going to notice that they need to go to the bathroom or that they're hungry or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is. They're all their attention is in this one thing. You mentioned something about offering a variety of foods. What had come up to my mind is circling back to that intuitive eating. What that you
Mm-hmm.
said that you kids will be drawn to what they need, or we're drawn to what we need, even if we're not really sure why. There's something in our body or energy that needs that food. Oftentimes, when parents ask, "What should I feed my baby?" from the beginning, when you're introducing solids, that's like another thing is put a variety of things in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that maybe some of them will get played with, some of them won't get touched, and some of them might get eaten. And that's okay.
Yes.
Put a little bit of multiple things, and that
Mhm,
allows them to energetically, even at 6 months, start tuning
mhm,
into what looks interesting to me right now, what maybe smells interesting. And it just introduces them to the idea of instead of us prescribing one food to them,
mhm.
to within reason, oftentimes we
Yeah,
have a variety of foods on our plate, giving
mhm,
them a variety of foods from the beginning and allowing them to explore maybe what works for them. And oftentimes you'll find what works for them one night maybe won't work for them a week later. They won't want to touch it. They don't want anything to do with it. And you're like,
right.
you couldn't
Right.
like get your hands off of that and you devoured it so fast. But again, it's so crazy to watch what energetically. I remember with my daughter, we don't eat much red meat, and our roommate eats so much red meat, and she was like a dog with like when you
Mhm.
cook bacon or steak. I guess bacon's not red meat. I don't know, but steak for sure. And she wants red meat. Like
So
we are
want some
going to
red
start
meat.
buying steak
Yeah.
because our child wants red meat right now. So paying attention to what they're choosing is also kind of fun
Yeah.
to see as well, and
Yeah,
a
and
way
I
to
think
bond with them in a new way and feel like you're nourishing them and as they're growing as along their
mhm.
journey. So
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, I think what I was talking about with the plate thing is that we used to put M&Ms on the plate. So there was
yeah,
no that like
I
when you're
like
talking
that
about
idea.
variety, it's the M&Ms is next to the broccoli.
It's
You're,
almost like putting the dessert. It's that's you don't have to earn your dessert. You
yep,
can eat it at any time, but it's balanced. There's a whole
yep.
bunch of stuff here, and it's
I
not
think
just going to be endless dessert, 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 dessert.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's so interesting because one thing I noticed when kids come over and you can tell the kids that get denied sugar, like they do not have sugar in the house. They're not allowed to have it when mom's around because I'll have candy out in a bowl for months at our house just because like I'm trying to get rid of it. So I pull it out and we'll eat a little bit more so in the beginning when I pull it out, and then it just sits there with everything. But those kids that come over, it's like that bowl is devoured in seconds.
And I do want to acknowledge I 100% believe, and it's been scientifically proven, sugar is addictive. And so
So
there is an
addictive.
element to that. Like that
Yeah.
is a true statement.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to we live in a world where you can't escape sugar. And so
Yeah.
how do we healthfully relate to that
Mhm.
and the world we live in,
Yeah.
especially with something that's supposed to be life sustaining like food. Like
Yeah.
we can't just not eat. We
Yes.
can't sustain. We can sustain from sugar, but it's actually very hard to do.
Really
uh,
hard. And to all those parents out there that make it and do like raw food and super clean, I give you a ton of credit because that
yeah,
is some dedication and hard work. And here on the podcast, we 100% support everybody's
yeah.
way of doing things. Give us your tips and tricks for the sugar, and we'll definitely do a social media one. I think that would be a good one too at some point, kind of expand on our social
I
media
would love to invite somebody
intake.
with a teen, a
Oh my
preteen or a
gosh.
teen onto the podcast to talk about social media. And who knows, by the time our kids are teens, it might just be goggles that they have on.
I
I took
mean,
Penelope in the self-driving car the other day, the Waymo,
mhm. Uh-huh.
and I was just sitting there having these moments of she's never gonna have to drive a car in her life, probably
Yeah,
never. So
it's crazy. It's crazy. I was talking to Melvin one day. I was like, we used to have phones connected to walls. I feel really old saying that.
do you
Like I used to.
remember also here, let's just like go down nostalgia lane here for a moment. Do you remember being able to like pick up and listen to the other person on
Yes.
the line? You had to do it
And
real sneakily and quietly. Yes.
what was it?
The
Star
good old days when you could
69?
easily listen to everyone's conversation in the house.
Try to like quietly and not breathe and put on mute
Yeah.
and not hear the button get pressed.
Is that you on the phone? Do you have Amanda? Hang up the phone. Yeah. Anyways,
And star
oh
69. We got to talk about that.
yes,
Jumping
yes.
it.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
now that we've gone down a completely different rabbit hole, have fun with feeding your kiddo and introducing solids. And we're always interested in what people are doing. So reach out, share your tips, leave us a voicemail. We have a really cool voicemail line. If you don't know about it, it's at just this dot site, and it's all in the show notes. We've gotten a couple, lights my heart up to actually hear people's voices when they leave us little voice
Yes.
notes. So I
Or
mean,
send an email too.
we
I
love
love the
emails
emails.
too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I just want to say it doesn't hurt to take a first aid
Okay.
or CPR course.
Oh yeah.
Probiotics are good too, but it's so easy. And you know what, too? Like, I think it's just such a great thing to do and learn. Like, if you have a little one, because it's not like a regular Heimlich like we would do for adults. Like, you're actually
Mhm.
putting them over on
I
your
actually just
thing,
got
and then
I literally
to
2 days
bed.
ago did my
Yeah. Yeah.
recertification for CPR, and it's really easy now. You can
It's
take,
so
there
easy.
was someone in the class that literally
Yeah.
was just there because she was a mom of a 9-month old.
Yeah.
And you can take it online, and then you just go in for an hour or two to practice the physical
The
parts.
physical.
And
Yeah.
it's there, it's not, I know some people get intimidated by like the test or whatever.
Yeah.
There's no test. You were
Great.
gonna mention when you
The
were.
probiotics.
Oh,
I'm a
probiotics.
big,
Yeah, that was
yeah,
it. Oftentimes people will be introduce their kiddos to probiotics even before they get
yeah.
to solids. But if you haven't, and you might even find you don't need a probiotic after introducing solids, because you'll start to have yogurts and things that have
Mhm.
natural probiotics in them. Or if you don't have your kid on probiotics and they are experiencing digestive upsets, it's a nice way. Pre and probiotics you can look at,
Mhm.
because prebiotics are actually something you take as well that are a little bit different from probiotics. I don't know all the science behind it, but I do know that they both do different things and can help with the digestive
Yeah.
ease and digestive issues.
I don't know. I'll have to look in the prebiotics for kids, but I started my son on probiotics when he was like an infant, like just a few months old. So, and
Yeah,
he's pretty much been on them.
but it doesn't hurt. It's never going to hurt
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
take
And
probiotics.
if you do yogurt as a form of probiotic, make sure that it's like raw and it
As I
actually
was gonna
has
say, it's really
probiotics in there
hard.
because
I always recommend people, if they're still having digestive issues, still go on a probiotic, because
yeah,
yogurt often doesn't provide enough of what you need in the
right.
cultures.
It's really hard to find a good one. And when you do find one, they're like a little bit more expensive. So
Awesome.
yay.
Well, happy feeding, happy solids. So,
Happy solids. Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's justhis.site, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation, plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.